Okay, cool. Well, hello to everyone who has joined us today. I'm Amanda from Lone Design Club, and I'm kind of managing the Accelerator program, which is what this is part of. It's our kind of way to provide brands with useful tools and information, and also connect you guys to other designers or experts, but also to kind of answer any questions about kind of being a brand or running your own business, and all of the things that go hand in hand with that. So we've been running our webinar series since the start of lockdown, and it's been great to kind of cover a range of topics. Yeah, very pleased to be joined here today by Fran from the brand SABINNA, and with Priscilla, who's the founder of Kim Dave. So, do you guys want to give us a quick introduction to yourselves? Should we start with Fran?
Sure. So, hi everyone, my name's Fran, and I'm head of PR for SABINNA for the UK department. And we are a sustainable women's wear and lifestyle brand and create all of our garments ethically in the UK and in Austria. And yeah, our whole sort of ethos is to be sustainable beyond the product, which is why we also host experiences and workshops and do all kinds of fun things. We also do webinars. So yeah, really happy to be here.
Cool. Well, pleasure to have you. And yeah, I think it's really, really exciting to kind of hear what you have to say as you kind of built up the whole kind of PR concept around SABINNA. So yeah, very much looking forward to that. Thank you. Priscilla, do you want to give us a quick little intro?
Hello everyone, my name is Priscilla of Kim Dave. I am a women's wear and digital content creator based in the UK. I sort of started the brand in October last year. Prior to that, I taught a lot of like sewing and pattern tutorials on YouTube. So that sort of fed into my clothing and garment make, because I focus a lot on like really good finishing, and everything is made in the UK. But the sort of main inspiration behind the brand is my heritage, which is from south of Nigeria. A lot of the pieces are named by names from my tribe and have like really deep, well thought stories behind each collection, each edit. So you sort of like hear a little bit about my tribe or learn something new whenever you check out a new garment or a new collection. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Cool. Well, do you guys want to give us a bit about kind of the brand story, about your brands and kind of why it was set up, what the kind of like whole kind of company ethos is? Start with Fran.
So we were founded 5 years ago. We actually just in February of this year, we celebrated our 5th birthday. And SABINNA, our founder, she studied at Central St. Martin's, and she always kind of knew that she wanted to found her own brand after graduation. And the whole idea behind it was to create something that challenged the status quo of the industry. So in our case, it was sustainability, which from the beginning has been really important to her. She learned handcraft from her grandmother, and she wanted to kind of incorporate that into her garments. So we do a lot of crochet stuff, a lot of handmade stuff. So we have our headbands and our masks, which are all made by hand. And it's really important to us that that sort of process of manufacturing doesn't really get lost, and that we actually don't kind of lose these skills in the future in the fashion industry. So as I mentioned earlier, our whole ethos is to go beyond the product when it comes to sustainability. So it's not only important to us that our garments are sustainable, but also everything that goes on behind the scenes. So whether that's, I mean, it can be as simple, quote unquote, as reducing your plastic consumption, but even to paying everyone in our team. So whether that's an intern just starting out or the actual person behind the garment creating it. So we have all of these like sort of frameworks that make our brand who we are, and essentially that all influences the final product and the garment. But we also try to show that as best as we can and go give our customer a look behind the scenes and be 100% transparent and be able to answer all the questions that they might have. So I hope that sort of answered it a little.
Definitely, yeah, thank you. And Priscilla, I feel like you kind of touched on it briefly there.
Yeah.
But what's kind of like, why is your brand Kim Dave and not Priscilla?
I get that question a lot. So Kimberly is the other English name my parents gave to me, and Dave is my dad's name. So it's essentially still my name, but I wanted a name that could become more than just me. So if I would hire a team of people, if we were to grow in the future, it would not just be about me or what I do anymore, but a collective effort of everyone who works for Kim Dave at that point. Uh, a huge part of what makes the brand really special for me and anyone who comes to contact with it is all of the names, like I said earlier on, the tribal names, and they have like special meanings behind them. And every collection has like a story. Like this robe I'm wearing on right now is called the Omote robe, and Omote means girl in my language. And girls are often sort of like domesticated in the sense of stay in kitchen, cook for the family, not really expected to go outside and discover themselves and explore more. So the robe sort of has that special indication that you are a girl, you can be the best cook in the world, but if you want to go out and do something more, you have the option to do that as well. So every piece sort of has like that story behind it. And for the designs that I make, I never really make more than 2 of each size for every piece. So it's really exclusive in the sense that there's not a lot of the garments out there. So when you're actually buying into the brand, you're literally buying like a piece of the story, a piece of the heritage, and you learn something new about the Yoruba tribe, which is the name of the tribe from south of Nigeria. In terms of the other thing that I really try to do is I never throw my scrap fabrics away. I literally have a cupboard full of scrap fabrics. And this year I just started like intentionally keeping them even more and discovering sort of like projects, garments, little things that I could make instead of just throwing the fabric away. So that way I'm reducing the amount of waste that my brand is generating and also making money from that waste, which is something that I think a lot of creatives and designers should really consider. So I make scrunchies, I'm planning to make hairbands. I'm working on like a scrap rug for like weeks now. It's taken so long, but I think it will be worth it. I've worked on like a dress recently made of like different patches. So I think like every part of like the Kim Day brand is really special in the sense that you learn a little bit about the tribe and you also sort of like buy into that like really exclusive experience because not a lot of the pieces are made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I feel like sustainability is like a massive buzzword in the industry. It has been, it is now, it has been for a while, and it's great to see it kind of growing more and more in popularity with larger brands. Obviously sustainable, smaller brands are far more sustainable in terms of knowing their supply chain and things like that. But also what's great to see is kind of like the consumer facing side, like people are on the lookout for sustainable brands. But do you guys think sustainability is fairly portrayed within the media? Is it rightly portrayed? Is it a sense of greenwashing? And why is the focus still on large brands? What do you guys think?
Do you want to start?
No, please go ahead, Fran.
Well, it's always really tricky and dangerous to generalize, but I think speaking more of a broader sense, I think the representation isn't as accurate as it could be, and there is still a massive lack of representation. And I personally even have noticed especially is that when there is an opening or an opportunity to feature a sustainable brand, time again and again, big fast fashion brands who claim they're sustainable get that feature over again. And that's just really frustrating to especially a small independent brand who is actively trying to challenge what sustainable fashion looks like and what that signifies and what sustainability even means. Maybe we should even clarify. So for us personally, as I mentioned, it goes beyond the product, but it's so much more than only using natural fibers. So everything that goes on behind the scenes as well, the social impact we have as a brand. So it's also important to mention maybe that it's almost impossible to be 100% sustainable for a brand. But doing the best you can is really important, and there's always room for improvement. But going back to your question, I don't think it is a fair representation, because sustainability is still very much a niche, and that is a fact. And unless sustainable and ethical brands are on the same level as fast fashion brands and are able to compete with them in a manner where that image of what that type of fashion looks like isn't as blurred anymore, because I think a lot of consumers still have, when you mention sustainable fashion, they still think, oh, it's like beige trousers and like a cotton blouse, and it's they don't even, they're not aware that sustainable fashion can be so much more than that, and it can be colorful and make you feel confident, and you can wear bright colors and that garment can still be produced ethically. So I think there's so much room for education, and the media certainly has that power to do that. So in one way or another, it is frustrating when there is an opportunity to feature a brand who produces ethically or who is independent, and time again and again they feature someone who isn't but claims to be. Yeah.
I don't think there's much that I would add to what Fran just said. I think the only thing I would say, it's really difficult to be a sustainable brand, especially when you're new starting out, and be able to make a lot of profit straight off the ground. You really need to like build that reputation for a while before you get to the point where people recognize your work and recognize how much effort that goes into making your products and the story and everything behind it. So it's a lot more difficult to do, but I think it's something we should really embrace, because the choices that we make tomorrow, we might not be the ones to feel the effect now. It's our children, our great-grandchildren that will actually feel it. So being more responsible in the choices that we make now is really, really important. I think if we are also honest about like wages and production and things like that, I wish more brands would do that, because the thought that there is someone somewhere getting underpaid for you to buy that top at £5 is just really heartbreaking. So yeah, transparency in terms of like production. I think more big brands should really be honest about it and just say it as it is, or just pay people better. It's not that deep. They have the money. They don't just want to they don't want to pay it. So it is what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of an interesting note to cover that PR itself has kind of changed a lot in the past few years. You think 10 years ago, it was very much a focus, or like 10, 20 years ago, very much focused on newspaper, print, magazines. That was considered what people wanted for press. Now we have online magazines, we have influencers, bloggers, all different sides of things. So what do you guys really consider to be like either your goal or just press in general? Like what are the press outlets right now?
For us personally, especially speaking over the last year, so we've noticed a massive surge in like sustainability influencers, like influencers who are really conscious about not just fashion, but the planet and being zero waste. And that's just their whole lifestyle. So everything starting from fashion to like just going plastic free or whatnot. It's just something that truly matters to them. And we've, apart from the press, which are also obviously really big power players in the industry, we've also found to build really close-knit relationships with them has been super valuable for us, because their influence should not be underestimated. Obviously, it depends massively on who that influencer is and how much influence they have in the industry. But even if I think about myself on a personal level and who I follow on Instagram, for example, like I follow most influencers for a reason. I mean, pretty much all of them for a reason, like either because I'm learning something from them or because they always recommend great products or great brands to try out. But I've literally unfollowed everyone that I didn't feel inspired by. And I think that same thing goes for brands. If it's so important to target, to find those influencers that are relevant to your brand, where you can see them promote your brand and where you can both get something out of that relationship. And that whole surge in influencer culture has massively also, I think, changed the press landscape, because you see press now collaborating with influencers as well, because even though before that they were sort of skeptical, I think they were sort of like taken aback and thinking, oh, they haven't studied, or they are not a proper journalist. Why would I collaborate with them? But I think slowly but steadily, they're also seeing the value and sort of the success in that whole influencer culture. So I think it's a matter of merging these two worlds, which are never really going to be alike, I don't think. But how even press and influencers can massively profit from each other, and therefore also brands. Because at the end of the day, it's all about building those relationships, and whether that's with press or influencers. So I think the more the intertwined they get, the more every single sector can benefit from each other, I think.
What do you think, Priscilla?
I'm just here taking notes because Fran definitely has so much knowledge, and I'm just here like, okay, influencers, let's check that out. What I would say is, so because I have the opportunity to be on the producing end and on the consuming end, I've been making sort of like YouTube videos, and I noticed people appreciate it more, or they're way more curious to actually see how the garment is made rather than just seeing the finished product. So I've had a design that people asked to, oh, show us how to make the pattern, show us how to sew the garment. So then they understand sort of like how it was made. I don't know why, but they just sort of want to see like the anatomy of the garment. So in the sense that they can choose if they want to make it themselves or if they actually want to purchase. So I think just sort of like seeing how people consume like YouTube tutorials and Pinterest of like DIYs in the sense of like creating digital learning content on YouTube. It's just interesting to see that people are curious to know how things are made, so they can, one, make it themselves, maybe using a different kind of material, or to choose to support the brand if they wanted to. So that's all I'll add to the question.
Yeah, because I wanted to bring up that part of, you know, PR, because you guys have both got, in your own right, quite a good following on Instagram. And so in your own sense, you've kind of built up your own PR platform that you can then use to reach out to people and directly connect with them. So I think that is kind of an interesting kind of area to explore. And it's like, how can you build up? How did you guys manage to build that following and get that influence and, you know, build up that engagement and that customer relationship, and kind of in your own sense be like promoting yourselves but directly to followers, instead of having to go through a third party and through having to, you know, use a newspaper to promote yourself? You've been able to kind of do that organically on your own. Lady Fran?
I feel like I can speak for both of us when I say that for both of our brands, storytelling is really important. And for us, since the beginning, it's been incredibly important that customers not only buy a garment that they're going to wear 3 or 4 times and then it's going to end up at a charity shop, but if they purchase a SABINNA garment, they purchase a story behind it and an emotional experience as well. So it's incredibly important to us that customers have that close-knit relationship with their garment. So therefore, it's always been important for us to translate what we want to say with our garments into our social media as well. And so when you look at our profile, we want you to know immediately straight away what we're about and what our values are and what we're promoting. So that's sort of the core idea behind our social media. So we use all social medias, but obviously our strong focus is Instagram because it's definitely the most successful platform for us. And it's been quite interesting, again, especially in the last year or so. I mean, the very early stages of the brand 5 years ago, definitely the very start, like what you mentioned, Priscilla, getting that head start and like gaining that recognition in the industry is incredibly difficult and can take ages. And what we've noticed, again, speaking about influencers, is that the most amount of followers we have received by influencers tagging us in their Instagram stories. Not even posts, not even paid posts, but literally just stories, which is also easier to follow because they're only up for 24 hours. So if an influencer mentions us and tags us in their story, and all of a sudden we gain like 500, 600 followers, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that much, but because it can sometimes really drag getting more influencers, we immediately know, okay, they must come from that influencer. And it's also been quite interesting to see just in terms of how many followers an influencer has versus how much engagement they have. So how much quote unquote power they hold. And you can also easily spot who buys their followers and who doesn't. So almost with every partnership and collaboration, you become smarter and you learn more. And so the last year has been probably the first year that we've actively really focused on that and how to build relationships. So it's been quite an intense year because you try, and then you make mistakes, but then you do it again. And it's really frustrating if it doesn't work out the way you want it to. But yeah, it's definitely a learning process, and you can't not do it by trial and error. Like I probably don't know a single other person in the industry who just does everything right constantly and everything just works out for them. I think you always invest your money into something that you regret later, or like, oh, I shouldn't have collaborated with that influencer. It didn't get me anywhere. But it's all about that, and all about trying to figure out what works best for your brand, because at the end of the day, every brand is so different from each other. So it's, yeah, very much trial and error.
I think for me, I knew very early on, sort of showing the making of garments was going to be an integral part of the brand, because I sort of had a double start in the sense that I did a totally different degree. I came back and studied all over again. So I was very intentional when I was going to fashion school. I knew I was going to start my own brand, and I wanted people to appreciate the amount of work that goes into making a single garment. People really can't understand. You sketch that garment, you make the pattern, you make your toy, you make your sample, you make the garment that you might not even sell, and nobody sees that. So I wanted to share that entire journey and make people understand that, look, you're buying that top for 95 pounds, when in all honesty should be 2,000 pounds, because the amount of hours, tears, sweats, and sleepless nights that has gone into that top is way more than 95 pounds. But because you're trying to build a brand that's affordable and accessible to people, you price it reasonably. So for me, I think that honesty in showing the creative process is what has really drawn like a lot of people to the Kim Dave brand in terms of like the DIY and the making part. And that what makes people appreciate each piece I make, because they know, okay, this is how long she takes to make one dress. We know she would take her time making the product that she's actually going to offer for sale. So that transparency, that honesty, that sort of sharing my failures, which I actually do a lot and I regret sometimes, just really makes people understand that, fashion design is not for the weak of heart, and running a business in the fashion industry is something that you need a lot of courage, bravery. And I think if more people were honest, we would have more sustainable brands moving forward.
Yeah.
Just to add to that really quickly, I couldn't agree more. I think that's one of the number one issues our industry has. I mean, the fashion industry has a lot of issues, but definitely one being that customers have become so detached by the value of garments. and how much work goes into them. And I'm very much included. Prior to, I mean, I studied fashion, but prior to studying fashion, I was very much living in a bubble and buying fast fashion, not really thinking twice. And I do understand, obviously, there is that whole economic aspect, and a lot of people not being able to afford a garment that's priced 200 pounds and over. But I think when you look back at time and how much garments were priced in the past, and how much more appreciation there was for something, and how people would buy a jumper and then they would wear it for 5 years, and then when it finally was just all holes, they would then throw it out. And how our society is all about consumption nowadays. I think that's, so I really commend you for like really showing that behind the scenes thing, because it's so important that you see that as a customer, because maybe next time when you walk past H&M or a fast fashion store, you're not going to walk in because you know, okay, you have that knowledge. And I think that's really important, that customers are being educated and know all these facts about what's going on and how much work goes into it. Definitely.
Yeah, and in terms of kind of like you guys' process for kind of reaching out to press or getting that press exposure, do you guys work with a PR agency, or have you ever worked with a PR agency? She's shaking her head.
So I manage, so we just in the last year, we started to build our in-house PR in the UK, which I'm responsible for. And we do have a PR agency in Berlin, in Germany, because we have quite a big German market in Austria and Germany. So she's solely responsible for that in Berlin. And then I'm handling UK. And we used to have one in the UK, but that we just didn't really see the value in it. And it, didn't get us very far. So it's absolutely been a challenge, especially like constantly staying up to date with everything that's going on and building those relationships. Especially, I think it's important to mention that press, like the roles of who's in charge of what and who writes for what department, they change around quite quickly. Like usually, I mean, it's happened before that within 3 months, there's a new person in charge of like the lifestyle section or something. So it's important to stay up to date with like emails and stuff. I mean, that goes without saying, but it's been challenging, because you can be successful with one editor and then they feature your product, and then you email them 6 months straight again, and then they never feature you again. So I think it's almost, if you don't build that relationship on a personal note as well, without just being strictly business, like if you're not friends with someone potentially, or if you don't know them outside of the industry as well, it's really hard to get into, because I don't even want to imagine from a journalist perspective what it's like to receive probably 1,000 pitches every single day for products. So I'm not surprised that unless they're absolutely interested in your product, that they never get back to you, because they don't have the time to do that. It totally makes sense. So I think obviously it's definitely a plus if you build those relationships outside of the industry as well. But if you can't do that, it's a matter of figuring out how to build them if you're not friends with industry people. And I think that's where your brand story comes in and what your brand is all about. Like a good example for us would, for example, be our t-shirts are all 100% circular. So in the last 6 months, we've introduced, so prior to that, we've always done t-shirts, but only in the last 6 months, we've introduced circular t-shirts. So that basically means you buy a t-shirt. If you don't want it anymore, you can scan the QR code inside the t-shirt. They're all made from 100% organic cotton. And then you get instructions sent to your email on how to send that t-shirt back to the factory, where they 100% recycle it and then turn it into new t-shirts. So when we were pitching those t-shirts, that's been, I mean, apart from the message on the t-shirts, that's also been one of our strong points, where we were able to sell it adequately and say, okay, it's a nice t-shirt, but it's also 100% circular and sustainable. So maybe the next time you're writing something about circularity or how to be more sustainable, maybe you can include it. So obviously that doesn't go for every single product, but if you have a product like that that tells a really specific story, I think it's important to sell it that way, and to also really important sell it in like the shortest way possible, because again, editors don't have a lot of time. So the shorter you can summarize what your product is about, the better, because then they can just skim it and immediately know, okay, I really want to feature that or don't. I feel like that was a really long answer.
Oh, very adequate, Fran. Like, I'm just here taking notes.
No, I think it's really good, because that is one of the questions that we get asked a lot from a lot of brands. Is like, should I be working with a PR agency? And obviously they're going to tell you that they can do amazing things for you. Or they say that they can work maybe 3 days or a month for you. And it's like, that is not enough time for someone to be able to promote your brand. Like, they're not going to get you any good press if they are doing it 3 days out of a whole month. And for a lot of small brands, that's all that they can afford. Or they end up putting huge amounts of budget into press and don't kind of reap the rewards of that, because these things, as you say, like, it's relationships that you're building up, and people need time to come to terms with new brands. If someone gets pitched like the Chanel cruise collection, then great, of course I can write about that, because everyone's curious to know what goes on inside the world of Chanel. Like, that's an easy sell for a PR company. But I think it's definitely important to kind of note that you kind of can run the press side of things yourself for up to a point, and then when you get to that point, it's good to know that you are ready to then move on to a PR agency, and they're going to bring you that added benefit. But I think it's kind of like, I don't know if, Fran, you might know, like, what stage do you have to be at to know that you're ready to kind of go from doing PR yourself to then needing the agency? Like, why Berlin do you have an agency do it for you?
So for us, the main reason why we have one in Germany is because we are London based. So we needed someone who knew sort of the German market really well and who had those contacts in Germany. Both Sabine and I are from Austria, so we do know quite a few people in Austria, but we really wanted to explore the German market further. And we've been with that agency, I think, for over a year now. And we're really happy and satisfied with the work she's doing, 100%. I think for the UK market, it was exactly what you described earlier, how it is a lot of money. These PR agencies charge a lot. And I'm not saying by all means that they're not worth it. Like, obviously, they do have really good contacts, which is also probably why they're charging so much. But what you said, how they only dedicate 3 to 4 days a month for your brand, and that doesn't even guarantee you success, because even though they might have all these great contacts, your product can still not be right for an article they're working on at the moment. So you might be with them for, I don't know, 6 months with that agency and only get 3 pieces of coverage. And that, at the end of the day, you can't forget that ultimately what you want is that for that coverage to translate into sales, because you can have all the coverage in the world and have amazing press stories and articles in the biggest magazines, but if you don't generate sales, then that's not going to get you anywhere. And I think that's also something you see as a brand in other brands as well, time and time and again. They have like the most amazing coverage, but then they still go bankrupt or they don't make any money because they don't actually make money from that press coverage. But going back to what you were saying, for us, I think it's been mainly that we wanted to take things into our own hands. I mean, we've always managed our own social media. So primarily we've built those influencer connections through social media, through our Instagram, by interacting with them. So that's been our number one thing. And other than that, it's, again, been very much trial and error. Just a matter of dedicating a specific, not necessarily day, but a specific time in the week and a couple of hours a week solely for PR and sending out pitches and working on like plans and timelines, what we're going to be working on next. So by when do we need to pitch it, and just figuring out a whole strategy, because for example, magazines, they usually work 3 to 4 months in advance. So they're already taking pitches for winter products or fall products. So they're already working on knits, whereas short leads like online, you could literally probably, an example would be how masks in the UK on the 24th, they're going to be mandatory in shops. I think it's the 24th, yeah. So maybe there's even some short lead publications who are looking for a new article on masks. So there's still enough time to pitch that. So just figuring out all of that and learning as you go along has been a lot of hard work, but at the same time, us keeping it all in-house, and then even, let's say I leave SABINNA tomorrow, hypothetically, which I'm not going to do, but she still technically has those valuable relationships. They might just get passed on to another person, so the person right after me. But with a press agency, it's a lot of times a lot more difficult to stay in touch with these people, because that agency has been handling all of the correspondence for you. And they usually also don't want to give you their contact. But all that being said, I'm not saying don't go with an agency at all. Like, I know lots of other brands who've had amazing experiences with them. I think it's just, if you're a small independent brand, you're so careful where and how you spend every little money that you have, and everywhere you spend it is a risk. Sure. And I think it generally depends on your own brand and whether or not you see that risk as one worth taking. But for us, especially given that we've been with an agency and we didn't really see the value in it, yeah, it was just basically another risk on SABINNA's part to try and hire me and see how this relationship and how this part of PR is going. But yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
And then Priscilla, what does your PR outreach look like?
Mine is really organic, because a lot of the influencers I've worked with were people who either reached out to me or who I reached out to on Instagram or via email, and who we either had like a connection, maybe our ethnicity or our race, things like that, that we connected to on a personal level. Then I would sort of like send pieces to them, and they would shoot for me, and I would be able to use those pictures on my store and on my socials. So mine is really a lot smaller, more intimate. I haven't quite gotten to the point yet that I think I need to work with any agency on any level, because I need to be able to make enough money to pay that agent, and I'm not quite doing that yet. So being careful how I'm spending is something that I take very seriously. So mine is really, really small, really organic. I just work with influencers that are either based in the US, UK, in Nigeria. I think there's another country I can't quite remember, but yeah, pretty small at the moment.
Cool. And so what would be like, what's like the goal with press coverage? Like, are you kind of looking, are you guys like thinking you want to be on the cover of Vogue, or like?
I mean, if you're asking, that would be nice to just put like just put a tick next to it. But it's like what Fran said, would it generate sales? If it doesn't, no, Vogue, you can wait. Like, if I'm not going to get sales at the end of the month, then I'll pass. But it would be nice to be on the cover of Vogue.
But in like, I guess in kind of, I don't know if you guys kind of factor into like maybe a 5-year plan or something. Is there kind of like various stages of PR that you're like, okay, like this, in the next 3 months, I really want to get to be working like really closely with an influencer who represents my brand really well. By the end of the year, I want to be featured in some kind of like Christmas gift guides. Next year, I'd really like to kind of be like more in a photo shoot kind of thing. Like, do you guys think of it in terms of that, or is it like any press is good press, right?
A little bit of both. I mean, we do have certain goals, like what you mentioned earlier, building those influencer relationships. We definitely have a list of people in the UK, but also in the German-speaking region that we really want to work with and build a closer relationship with. But we also, I feel like the pandemic has also taught us to not plan too far ahead, because a lot of our plans that we had for the rest of the year got canceled, which has been frustrating. Obviously, it's not bad to have a 5-year plan, but I think that's just been a massive learning experience for us, that we're not going to plan, which we didn't do anyway. We didn't plan 5 years ahead, but to not plan everything super thoroughly, because you never know what might happen. And the pandemic, I think, set everyone back like by 10 steps. But overall, I mean, obviously, like Priscilla said, it would be great to be on the cover of Vogue, but I think for us personally, I think the main sort of aim is just to spread, and as cheesy as that might sound, but just spread the word of sustainability and make it more inclusive and teach and educate more people about it, which is, as I mentioned earlier, we do these workshops where you learn how to crochet or make a beaded flower clip. And the main idea behind that is to sort of teach the customer and the person making it how long it takes to make something. And even though it's something really tiny, but when they see how long it actually takes to crochet, I don't know, a candy cane brooch, and whereas they might think, oh, it's only going to take 15 minutes, but then it ends up taking 3 hours if you've never done it before. That one task can teach you so much about the process of a garment and how much work goes into it, which is also, I think, something you're definitely doing, Priscilla. But so in that sense, it has everything to do with that and spreading that message. And obviously, it would be great to grow and to constantly keep growing, but that growth factor isn't necessarily our main sort of goal. So our aim isn't to be as big as the luxury brands, which would be nice, but I think if that's your sole intention and your sole intention is to grow fast and make a lot of money, then you should probably question why you're having a fashion brand in the first place. But at the end of the day, sales are important because it's what keeps the business alive. But it's also equally important to rewrite those goals constantly. Whereas for us, for example, one of our goals was to host 2 more pop-ups abroad, and that plan kind of got canceled. Now it's not as big of a deal because you just adapt to the situation, even though that might be hard at first, but then you have set yourself new goals for the next year. But I think, again, it's a matter of, for each brand, deciding what works for them and where their values lie.
So I think for me personally, I do have like people in terms of like influencers and brands that I would love to work and collaborate with. We'll see how the year sort of pans out. At the moment, I literally only have 4 weeks. My plans do not go beyond 4 weeks, because what Auntie Rona has taught me is I think until it sort of gets to the point where things are way more stable, I don't want to sort of make any investment that I would risk losing that investment or things getting cancelled. So mine is about 4 weeks at the moment in terms of like people I'm planning to work with, new pieces I might possibly work on, workshops and things like that. So in my mind, it's like October, November is like the max of like how far ahead into the future I would plan at the moment, until we see how like the pandemic settles down.
That's probably smart.
I mean, for the size, I think that for the size I am at right now, because everything is sort of done locally, like fabrics, production, everything is really like in-house. I think I can afford to do that. But for you guys, it's a much bigger scale. So I think, it's the dynamics are slightly different in terms of like planning and execution.
I mean, yes and no. It has been prior to the pandemic, but I think now we've also really learned that I mean, for us, the pandemic has been one of the most stressful times in the entire 5 years we've been in business. For everyone, obviously, it goes without saying. But I feel like we literally rewrote our entire business plan almost every single week. Like every single week, we were just like, okay, other brands are doing that. Should we be doing that too? No. What else can we do? How can we innovate? How can we stay up to date? And it was just one thing after the other. And I think now slowly coming out of it all, again, it's all about finding what works for you and what's authentic to you as a brand. And just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean you have to do it, because it might even backfire and not really work out for you in a positive way. But I think it's absolutely sensible, especially because nobody really knows how we're going to evolve and come out of all of it, to not be thinking too far ahead. So
yeah, sort of how people consume fashion too, like how they buy, what they're buying, people working from home, would that be a permanent thing? So all of that is still being defined at the moment, and I guess you have to wait, pray, and see how it goes.
Oh, well, I have one final question, but just before I ask it, if anyone who's watching has any questions or anything that they want asked, either by Fran or Priscilla or myself, then definitely pop it in the group chat now, just the Zoom chat, and then we'll come around to answering all of them. And just while you guys sit there and think of what questions you're going to ask, I was just wondering, in terms of kind of influencers, what do you guys do? Do you pay influencers? Do you lend products, or do you do gifting?
I kind of do all three. So I've worked with an influencer who happened to be a model, and she fit the brand aesthetic perfectly. So I just sent the pieces to her. She shot the products for me, and those pictures were shared so many times. I actually worked with her again. So in that case, I sort of gave her the pieces, and then I paid for the photography, which came out really, really good. I've also worked with one who I just sent the pieces to. I didn't pay her anything, and she was more than happy to get really good pictures for the product. And then I've had those where I sort of just paid them to promote the brand in their stories or mention it on their Instagram. So I sort of do all three, and the result really depends on the influencer and the messaging that they attach, sort of like the caption that they attach to your product. So all three across the board.
Yeah, we do all three as well. And I think it's important probably to mention that if you decide to work with an influencer, to also respect the fact that that is their job. So equally, as much as you, the person behind the brand, would like to get paid, that person probably likes to get paid as well. Even though there are still people looking down upon influencers, being like, oh, like that's not a real job, and why should I be paying them? But then that same thing could be said for interns. Why should I pay interns? Which people should, by the way. But it solely depends. Like in the past, especially during the pandemic, for example, we started to make masks, so face coverings, and we've decided to send out a couple to influencers without paying them, because it was generally gifting, and we didn't even expect them to post anything. So I think the main importance is being transparent about what you want the outcome to be, because you cannot gift them something but then get offended because they don't post about it, because they probably don't see it that way. If you say, oh, I want to gift you something, could you kindly send me your address? They don't see that as an obligation to post. I think it's really important to be transparent what you want, and if you do want them to post about it, pay them. But at the same time, if they do decide to post it without you paying them, which also has happened with us in the past, that we generally gifted them something and then they posted it in their stories, that's obviously really, really generous of them, and by no means something they have to do. But it was also sort of a learning experience for us, like how, if you do decide to do a paid partnership with someone, how much do you invest, and are you going to get anything out of that outcome? Like, how much influence does that influencer really have? And I think that's, again, I feel like I've mentioned this so many times, that whole trial and error thing. Like, we've had one influencer mention us in her stories 3 times because we gifted her face masks, and she has a massive following, and that's worked out really well for us. So we've decided that we're probably going to partner with her in the future because it's shown us she has a really big following and she has a massive influence. But yeah, it's a matter of seeing that relationship between influencers and a brand equal to the relationship between press and a brand, and acknowledging that they hold an equal amount of power in the industry, if not more, because they generate content a lot quicker. They have that really personal relationship with their audience because the audience feels like they can connect with that person. Whereas if you read a magazine and if you read an article, you don't really know who's behind it. You just know the magazine. So it's a whole type of part of relationship, but one that should be equally as important to the press. I think Amanda's stuck.
She looks really pretty though.
I'm not sure if you can hear us.
Hello, Amanda. Oh, I don't know if she can hear us.
Okay.
Can everyone hear us? It's just the 2 of us.
Oh, she's gone.
Oh no.
Okay. Okay. Somebody asked, oh yeah, there's a question. Somebody asked, do you know of any good examples of successful, sustainable PR campaigns? Oh, that's a good one.
Really good one.
Trying to think of like sustainable brands first. I
think the one I can think of off the top of my head is
Amanda.
Nudie Jeans. Oh, she's back. Is she back? It's still the same. Yeah. It's still the same picture.
I'm not sure necessarily if I can think of like PR cam.
Sorry about that. My wife.
Oh,
Amanda. Can you hear us?
Carry on. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. No, I was.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you, Amanda.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Not necessarily PR campaigns, as in probably like advertisement and stuff, but definitely like influencer collaborations where you see loads of influencers promoting the same product, and that therefore translating into a successful collaboration. Like, for some reason, I can't think of a fashion brand, but I can think of lots of like ethical beauty brands or sustainable beauty brands that you see all over again on Instagram. And then you see like content creators and influencers who all work with that brand, and therefore they're doing it all in a really smart way. So that when you see it more often, you sort of then are much more likely to go on that website and check it out for yourself. And that doesn't only mean like seeing it on Facebook ads, but seeing influencers use the product or even wear, I don't know, a t-shirt, for example, would be a good example. If you see a lot of influencers wearing the same t-shirt, like the NHS one, for example, then you're probably, if you see it over and over again, you're much more inclined to go online, check out that t-shirt and see how much it costs. So I think sustainable fashion doesn't differ so much in that sense from regular brands that might be fast fashion. I think PR overall sort of is very much intertwined no matter what kind of brand you are. I think it's just a matter of how do you sell sustainable fashion, how do you sell that part of your brand compared to you being a fast fashion or a quote unquote regular brand. but I can't, trying to think. I'll come back to it if I can think of one. What about you, Priscilla?
I think the only one I can think of at the moment, I don't know if they still exist. They used to be called nudie jeans. They had this thing where you could bring your, if you bought a pair of jeans from them, you could bring it back in store. This was way before Corona. And they could, I think you could either exchange it for a new pair or they could recycle it and you get some money back. I honestly don't remember like the whole detail, but that was such a cool thing to do because people knew if they could wear the jeans for 3 months and just bring it back in store and either get money or whatever was being offered to them.
Yeah.
And that was a way to really get like returning customers back to the brand, one, and then two, promoting like sustainability in the sense that they are actually reusing those fabrics, the fibers from the denim, to either make more or break them down to make some other cotton-based garments. So that's one I remember, and this was years ago. And the fact that I still remember it means that it was a really good campaign because it struck me the moment I saw it. I remember checking out the store somewhere in London. I was like, wow, this is really, really dope. Like, I think people should do that more often, which you guys do with your circular t-shirts. That is amazing, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, it's that's what I sort of briefly touched earlier. It's all about sort of figuring out how you can sort of move on to the next step and how you can be more sustainable and more ethical. And like, yeah, that's why it's so important to always stay up to date with the innovation that's happening, because it is so broad and there is so much happening, and it's just a matter of how to stay in touch with it all. Sure. But yeah, like I said, our t-shirts weren't always that sustainable. So it's been a learning curve and yeah, a matter of improving, I guess. Yeah. Amanda, do you want to read I sort of started reading the questions.
Okay, I didn't want to dive straight in because I don't know kind of where we got to.
Okay, so I think the next one would be, do you have any PR advice for someone launching a new brand? Maybe you're probably better to give advice on that, Priscilla.
Yeah, I would say from my experience and from the mistakes that I've made is not to wait till your products are actually ready before you start that Instagram, start whatever social media platform you want to use to promote your brand, and start sharing the inspiration behind your brand so people already know your story before you drop that first picture of your first product or your first collection. I think that is really good because not only do you have people waiting to hear what you have to say when you're ready to actually sell, you sort of have an audience that could possibly become your market, which is what I sort of did. The issue I had was I then had an audience who wanted to DIY stuff and not necessarily want to buy stuff all the time. But inside the DIYers are people who are willing to spend their money. So if you can get that Instagram running, if you want to do YouTube, get that running so people learn more about your brand. If you want to be the face of your brand, put yourself out there. It's not a must. It's not something that you should do if you don't want to do. Something else that you could really consider is the production of your pieces should not just be something that you just dump on someone else, even if you don't know how to sew. Understand garment making. What kind of fabrics are you working with? What's the composition? What does the pattern look like? Take all those pictures, all those behind the scenes clips could really become very useful on your website, on your Instagram later on when you're ready to actually launch. And then if you can share like who makes your pieces, where are they made, how long does it take to make? Because the more people sort of see, this is from my experience, but the more people see how much goes, who makes what, and what to spend where, they understand why the sleeve looks like that, why the garment is worn that way, and it just becomes a lot more special. So start your socials way before you're ready to sell. Capture all your behind the scenes because it's really, really important. Even though people would not admit it, they actually really appreciate it when they go, oh, so that's how you cut the hemline of a skirt. Okay, now I know. It's just something that I think people find interesting. So capture all of that, like behind the scenes, all of those clips, all those videos, and share. If you're not making your garments, who's making your pieces for you, who are you collaborating with? Because I think it's really like fun and useful information that you could use.
I totally agree. That's also definitely something that's worked really well for us, like showing the behind the scenes aspect and just really being 100% transparent and showing how long it takes to make something, or the reasoning why we have decided to do something this way or the other way. Yeah, I think giving the customer that full transparency is just really, really valuable. I think to add to that, something I mentioned briefly earlier would just be, as tricky and frustrating as sometimes can be, but I think building those relationships with press, or in our case, I mean, what's worked the best is definitely with influencers, is incredibly valuable and really, really important. And I think to add to that is also, do not give up. It's, trust me, the last year has been super difficult and a very much a roller coaster in building that, like those relationships. And we're still not at a point where I'm personally happy with what we've achieved, because there's still room for improvement. But that being said, I think it's a matter of figuring out who's your customer, who's your target audience, and then building off of that audience, who's your target influencer. What does that influencer look like? If you're a sustainable fashion brand, maybe you don't want to focus on influencers who constantly promote fast fashion. Maybe you do really want to focus on those eco-friendly influencers. That being said, obviously, it can also really work the other way around. But if you think about it in terms of the audience of that person, in a lot of cases, if you're a sort of eco-friendly influencer, their audience is also going to be compiled of people who care about the environment, about sustainable fashion, about not using single-use plastic, all these kind of things. So they are therefore more likely to follow you then, because you as a brand and capture everything they care about as well. So again, lots of trial and error, but do not give up. And I'd also say probably setting aside a specific amount of like hours in your week where you solely dedicate those hours to building your PR strategy, and where you work on building those relationships. So whether that's 5 hours, I think 3 hours is a great amount. And you can even split that. You can, I don't know, dedicate 1 hour a week to solely pitching your products to press and figuring out who to pitch to. And then another one, maybe engaging with influencers on Instagram, and then another hour, I don't know, planning your new content or whatnot. So I think just finding out what works best for you, and reading probably is also another one, like lots of reading and listening to like webinars that we're doing right now, and see what worked for other brands, what didn't, and then based off of that, building your own strategy. Because at the end of the day, it's your own brand, or you work for someone else's brand, so it's going to be such an individual experience. So what might work for us or for you, Priscilla, might not work at all for someone else.
Sure.
So I think it's important to try these things anyway, and then see how relevant they are for you. Yeah.
Great, thank you, very helpful. Did you guys answer Melanie's question, or?
No, not yet.
No, not yet.
No. Okay, so this is probably going to be our last one, but it's a good one. So with greenwashing and social washing campaigns by fast fashion brands, how do we communicate the complexity of fashion supply chain in a way that is easy for the general public to understand?
I personally think there are lots of little ways you can do that without it making such a big deal out of it, where customers and the general public are being bombarded by facts and like almost fear mongering and like getting them scared off. One way for us were our workshops. So where we didn't primarily advertise them as like a learning experience, but it was more like, for example, around Christmas time, we do these candy cane crochet workshops where you learn how to crochet candy cane and then you turn it into a brooch or an earring. And we just advertise them as regular workshops, but subconsciously, and I've noticed that for myself as well, I didn't know how to crochet at all. And I was one of those people where it did take me 3 hours to make that crochet candy cane. And I could literally see my whole like perception of handcraft completely shift. Like prior to actually working in the fashion industry with, like, I mean, I did study it, but prior to working in the industry, I had no, I mean, I knew how to sew on a button and stuff, but that was about it. I had no design background. So especially someone not coming from a design background, learning how to do something like that, and then almost seeing everything that goes into making it, just taught me completely new sense of understanding and that whole behind the scenes look. So it can be something as simple as that. Obviously, workshops aren't for everyone, but then even just listening to people who are maybe knowledgeable about that, like podcasts are a really great example. There's so many ethical fashion podcasts out there, like Venetia Lamana, she's an influencer. She has a really great one. I think it's called Talking Taste Buds, and she constantly interviews people in the sustainable fashion industry. There's also one by Claire Press. She used to be the sustainability editor for Vogue Australia, I think it was. Yeah. And she has a really great one. So even if you aren't necessarily interested in the fashion industry, even if you're just a regular customer who enjoys shopping for fashion, there's still easy ways to learn about the industry without feeling like it's such a heavy burden. And every time you buy fashion, you're actually ruining the planet, because that's also, I think, a darker side of it that's not being talked about it as much, like that whole guilt tripping. Like, you don't want the customers to feel bad. Like, it's, if someone comes up to me and says, oh, I've purchased a garment from a fast fashion retailer, I'm not going to shame them. Like, it's just a matter of switching our whole idea. Like, for example, for me, it's very much been a process of how much fashion I consume. I'm by no means at a point where I can afford to spend like 500 pounds on clothes every month. But the way I've handled this is that I've just massively reduced my consumption, and I'm now much more conscious about what I purchase and how much I purchase. And when I walk past a fashion store, I ask myself several times, do I actually need to go in? Do I really need something? Do I not have 10 summer dresses already? And it's, for everyone, it's such a learning curve and such an individual experience. So I think just finding out what works best for you again, and how you prefer to educate yourself, and how, also what method of education you find easiest, is just, yeah, it's what matters the most, I think.
So I came from a background of, I came from a large family where you didn't get new dresses but once a year. And I remember moving to the UK and experiencing how much people shopped, and it was just a shock, like, wow, they shop a lot around here. It's like every week, every month end. And I think for me, that's why, like, the way my brand is the way it is, because I'm from a background where I understand and I see the direct effect, the landfills and everything, and the charity shops and the secondhand clothes and all that. So I already have experienced that sort of like lack and that dark side that people don't talk about. And then I came here and I knew from the very beginning that I wasn't going to do a fast fashion brand. So I made a deliberate effort to read and educate myself on like materials and tools and way that I could be part of the solution rather than contribute to the problem. So if I have to donate my scrap fabrics to a designer who makes accessories, who makes smaller goods, I will do that. If I have to make one size per style, I will do that. But I think that sort of research and learning more would really open your eyes to a lot of things that you really would not read in the magazines and they won't tell you on the news. So educating yourself, whether you're into fashion or not, is really important, because it really affects the choices that you make, how you consume things, how you interact with people. And yeah, people shop around here a lot. It's like, good Lord, it still amazes me till today, because you only got one new dress at Christmas back in Nigeria, like for my family. So yeah, it's really something interesting to just compare both sides of the scale. And yeah, just educate yourself if you can.
I think just one last thing to add to that, because I was thinking about it again, and how we can educate the general public. I think it's a matter of how it's about being open-minded as well.
True.
And as like what you said, I think it's a matter of how our entire society sort of needs to shift their mindset, which is obviously really tricky with anything, not just the issues we're facing in the fashion industry. But I think there are so many frameworks surrounding it, and I think breaking it down into little bite-sized pieces for everyone to be able to understand is how we're going to get far, and how we're going to get that sort of educational value to every person. So yeah, hopefully someday.
Well, cool. Thank you, guys. That was such a great discussion, and thank you to everyone who sent in questions. I hope we've been able to kind of shed a bit more light on the world of sustainability and PR. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. But massive thank you to Fran and to you, Priscilla, for giving us your time and all of your advice. That was really interesting. I think kind of there's so many different takeaways from this. So yeah.
Thank you so much
for having us. This was actually so much fun. My notepad is filled. I've honestly
Good, cool. Well, if anyone kind of has any thoughts or questions, Melanie is saying, thanks very much, great session, really interesting. Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, if anyone has any kind of thoughts or questions that they kind of come up with after this webinar and you'd like to kind of ask anyone here those questions, then feel free to get in touch. I've probably emailed you all. So definitely don't feel shy about reaching out. I'm sure you guys would love to answer some questions as well. So great. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Yeah, have a good evening, everyone. Bye.